all doing? My name is Lemon, and I'm a guy that makes websites. I think that I've probably gotten that in common with a lot of you, but it's something that I've been doing for literally over 2 decades, and it's something that continues to be interesting to me. Like, I've seen a lot of different kinds of media. I started out in sort of print media, but the thing that I loved about the web is that the only thing that is failure is what you consider to be failure. You can just make a website. Nobody gets to stop you from making a website. And the worst thing that can happen is your site sucks and everybody sees it. Anyway, I work at a company called Savas Labs. I live in Minneapolis, and the company is based in North Carolina. But we are a sort of traditional agency that does a lot of like for good kind of work. But my role, which I actually had to inform WayWeb because I got a promotion recently, so I am now the front-end development director, which means that my job is about mentoring, shepherding, and documenting. So my job broadly is to teach other developers how to write performant, slim, semantic HTML, and to work with them on their skills to be able to not just deliver to the actual business needs, but the needs of all of our users, be it having some sort of like motor function impairment or color impairment, whatever it might be. And that means that in that role of front-end development director, I am, of course, a very serious professional. And to prove that, here is a GIF of me playing Shooty Fruity in my pajamas in my, this was in my friend's house. He didn't know that this was happening. He was sleeping in. And I was like, well, I'm just going to play Shooty Fruity. And so he just woke up and just started filming me. I am a serious professional, but today I want to talk to you about a subject that I find very important. And that subject is performance. By which I mean website performance. And I know that that can be a boring subject. I know that when we're talking about kilobyte shaving and we're talking about millisecond shaving, that can be a dry subject. But it is an important subject, and I'm going to try to make it as fun for all of us as I possibly can. So we're going to go through the agenda very quickly. The agenda is I'm going to go through what is the problem. There is some problems in the websites that people are making. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the websites that people are making have some problems, and why should I care? Yes, I do websites for money, and sometimes client requests are dumb, and so why should I actually care about the performance problems that I'm having? After that, we're going to talk about what you can do about these problems. Knowing that these problems exist, knowing that there's a reason to care about them, what can you actually do about them? And then finally, we're going to get to how can I be happy, but like, you know, like with your website. Like, I'm not Deepak Chopra. I'm not out selling you magic crystals. I'm not trying to teach you how to heal yourself. I'm just trying to make you more happy with your website. To get happier, I think we should play a game. And this is a game that I bet a lot of you are familiar with. So when you see it, I want you to shout it out. Anyone know what this video game is right here? There we go. That is the 1993 id Software video game called Doom. I have a couple of facts about Doom that are relevant still to this day. This was released in 1993, as I mentioned. It was played by 20 million people in the first 2 years, and video games weren't not the thing that they are at that point. This popularized the first-person shooter genre. There were first-person shooters that existed before Doom, but it was Doom that actually solidified basically all of the tropes that would continue to exist to this day in games like, for example, Doom, parentheses 2016, or Doom Eternal, or any other first-person shooter that exists. And it was built using its own custom game engine. And that video game of Doom weighed in at 2.39 megabytes, and that was a business requirement. It was a business requirement because they were on 3.5-inch floppy disks, and so they had to fit it on a 3.5-inch floppy disk. It needed to be that small, and so the video game Doom that changed computing, that changed video games, fit in at 2.39 megabytes. Now here's another project I want to show you, and that project is Unfold 5.0. It is a WordPress theme. It used to be called 2017, but now they call it 5.0. But this is a WordPress theme, and oh, it already crashed. Okay, well, it already crashed, but we're gonna go back to it, and we're gonna see that we've got some parallax effects, and of course, that's very fashionable and interesting. It's called 5.0, except for right down here, they forgot, and they accidentally kept it as 2017. But we can see here, we've got some like hover effects that don't really do anything. We've got some click events that don't, we've got some, the top nav actually covers itself up at points, so that's very exciting. I can click on that thing and it doesn't really matter. There's some stock photos with some unsemantic captions, because those are all divs. They never wrote the word fig caption in their lives. There's a stock photo of an old man, and there are so many features in this. It's WooCommerce ready. It's a contact form builder. It's got parallax effects, as you can see, and we've got more hover effects that don't work at all. We've got a MailChimp form, and if we're gonna build an unsemantic website, you know we need a carousel. We absolutely need a carousel if we're gonna do a bad job of building a website. Here's some fake testimonials that are all lorem ipsum, and that's pretty exciting. And to follow it up, here's some fake people. But my favorite feature of a website is this button. This button right here is my favorite feature of a website, because when I get to the bottom of a website, I go, shit, what do I do now? How do I get to the top? Unfold 5.0, I got some facts about this project right here. It is $59 on ThemeForest. This is not an advertisement, I assure you. 500,000 people, or sorry, 250,000 people have said that sounds awesome. Here's my $60 for this theme. It's got parallax, it's got 35 images, 4 fonts, 12 JavaScript files, and 8 CSS files to cover basically the text of a Robert Frost poem. And that is just the homepage itself. And that is gonna clock in at over 15 seconds on a 3G connection. Total weight, 4.72 megabytes. Okay. So that means, because I'm really very good at math, insofar as I have a calculator on my computer, that is 197% as big as the video game Doom. So then the question is, was that project 197% as good as the video game Doom? This comparison I'm making here is actually not my comparison originally. I found this Wired article by Clint Finley, and it was the topic of was the average web page is now the size of the original Doom. Compelling. Compelling, and obviously we live in the year of our Lord 2013, and that means that all news is syndicated, so anytime some headline is good, it'll be syndicated 500 times. So here it is again on PC World. The average web page is now larger than Doom. It's basically the same headline, but we can see it more. We can see it on geek.com. The average web page is now larger than the original Doom. And when I saw this page specifically, I thought, hey, how come this page loads like shit? Let's open up Inspector. So here's the web inspector, and we can see what's happening. The average web page is larger than the original Dooms. Here we are at 9 megabytes, 265, 290, 300 requests, 15 megabytes. We keep going. The average web page is larger than this. Shame on you, says geek.com. Look at how bad your website performance is. We're now into 700 requests. These are all necessary because the advertising people said that these are all necessary, and advertising people never lie. So this is a trend that we continue to see. That article, the original Wired article there, was in 2016. Average web page larger than the original Doom. Yeah, maybe a slight dip, but this thing has kept going up over time. Every time that I've talked about this subject, I've tried to update this data, and every time I can see where the line graph is going, and it's not going the opposite way. And so you're looking at that and you're going like, well, okay, so there's more bytes, but like, hey, Lemon, hang on. What about Moore's Law, which is of course named after Julianne Moore in The Big Lebowski. If you're not familiar with Moore's Law, it's basically computers get faster. Cool. Except for, that's not exactly true of the internet. It's especially not true of internet service providers. And crucially, it's not widespread. If we look at this map right here, we've got broadband speeds in 2015. And if we look at that exact same map in 2013, we can see that the color changed. So that's helpful to know. But one of the things that we're learning here is we see in the light blue into the dark blue, we've got the example of, you look at Norway, you look at United States, you see those as dark blue areas, and you can see the spread of how unequal these speeds are. So if you're looking at this from a computer in a place of the world that has really good internet speed, cool, good for you. That's not true for everybody. And broadband speeds in Spain, you're doing actually pretty good. Very fastest broadband speed, Singapore with 264 megabytes down. Whoo, that's fast, but you are not that far behind with 189 megabytes. Cuba, a very different story, and that's sad for them. But things look a little bit different if we talk about mobile speeds, because mobile speeds also have a gradient. A gradient that starts with the United Arab Emirates, basically the same top speed. Now Spain, you're about in the middle here, and then Cuba at the bottom. So these speeds, again, this is averages, these are sourced facts, but these are averages, but these speak to the inequality of website speed, which is one of three factors. Because the second factor is that if you're talking about mobile data, there's actual costs involved. If you throw a big-ass MP4 on a web page, know that you're costing that person money to jam that into their cell phone. And that's going to look, again, different depending on the country that they're in. If you're in Israel, your per gigabyte charge is very, very small. In the United States, I would consider it quite large. But if you look at like the Falkland Islands or even Norway, very, very expensive to push a gigabyte of data onto somebody's cell phone. This is average. I recognize some people have meter connections, some people have unmetered connections, but this is still true in a widespread way across different countries. But that is only the second factor. There is a third factor, and that third factor is time. Because if we're thinking about these pages, if we're thinking about a 3 megabyte load, and we think about that in different kinds of connection speeds, well, okay, my 3 gigabyte connection, okay, in 2 seconds that happened, that's fine. 6 seconds, that took a while. You had to hear some garbage come out of my mouth. And maybe we got to the 10 seconds, but that 2G connection, which is not an outside occurrence, this is definitely something that happens in rural areas very, very frequently, that's gonna take 2 minutes for them to download that 3 megabyte file. We're not gonna get there. I'm not gonna leave us on the slide that long to get to that point. Because there's the thing of people leaving. And there's bounce rates. Everyone know what bounce rate means? If you don't, bounce rate basically means somebody went to your website and they bounced. Whatever it was that led them there, a Google search, a Facebook ad, your cool stickers, whatever it was that got to them to the site, they showed up, and before they had the ability to meaningfully do anything, they left. Some people will say they'll get their bounce rates to 0. They're lying. If you get a bounce rate about 7 to 12%, you're doing great. So this is a like-for-like comparison against the exact same type of content and what it means when this thing gets extended out. So in our beginning trough of our 1, 2, 3 second connection, people are basically in that 7 to 12%, and that's great. But once we get up here to 6 to 7 seconds, literally half of the people, whatever it was, that made them go, I'm gonna go to their website. They saw a spinning beach ball, they saw a white screen, and they went, nah, never mind. They left. And you didn't need that chart. You didn't need that chart because you are human beings, and that means that you are all experiencing time. I have never been to Spain before. I've never spoken at Web before. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be on this really, really cool stage. I'm so excited to be presenting in front of my daughter. I am thrilled, and that means that time for me is going fast. If you're not enjoying yourself as much, I'm so sorry. That might mean that time is going slower, but regardless, for all of us in this room, all of us experiencing this right now, we are experiencing time. And we do know that when we experience time, we're also aware that it's finite. And eventually, that time will fall away from us. Okay, so that's a lot. That's a whole lot, and nobody wanted to come to a web performance talk and talk about their own mortality because we are smart people. And when we're talking about problems, we are web developers, and we recognize that problems are things that we can solve. So this is going to be a talk about easy wins. I don't want to come to you with a stance of zealotry or fanaticism. I just want to talk about things that you can do to make marginal improvements to your site right now. So to that end, we're going to start with the easy stuff. This is a pie chart. You'll notice this one doesn't really have a citation because, I mean, it's a little bit of a napkin sketch. But we can look at a website basically and go like, well, there's a little bit of HTML. There's like some CSS. There's some font files, now that that's a thing. And JavaScript is going to be a whole bunch of it. And when we're looking in there for points to shave off, you might be looking at that orange slice of the pie. But also, you might have forgotten about images. So if we're going to look at the actual page load and how to get ourselves less bits over the wire, let's talk about that first culprit and what we can do about making that less severe. I forgot to start my clock. That's okay. I'm going to be on time. So let's go into our concept of images here. And you can start this off with a program that you might be familiar with called Photoshop. So there is a way to just go ahead and pull up whatever image that you have and go save that JPEG. And it's going to save that JPEG. And Photoshop is a program for photos, for photographers. And so it's not particularly interested in first blush at compression. And so you're not going to really want to do save as. If you're going to have a photo, for example, this photo of Bjork, who I think is one of the truest and most natural performers in the world. If we look at this photo of Bjork, there's a whole bunch of things that we could do with this image. And curiously, in the current Creative Cloud version of Photoshop, the thing that I actually want to do is I want to go export, and then I want to go save for web legacy. Hey, that's not great, but that's because Photoshop is a program that's 30 years old, and they can't change conventions, they can only add conventions. So once a convention already exists, if you look at the concept of like, why does every icon in Photoshop confuse me? Well, because that was the icon, and it can't change, it can only be added to. But if we go to our export interface, and we can do it here where we have the export interface inside of the export interface, because I was feeling very clever when I did that screenshot, we can see that we've got a whole bunch of different sort of data points about like our actual image size, and then our file type and our connection speed. So if you're going into this thing, and I had a live demo version of it, but it was kind of eating up time. And so if you go into this particular interface, you can go ahead and start to shave off those unnecessary pixels. And an important thing that I want to say about this is that if you're talking about lossy photos, which is what a JPEG is, also what some WebPs are. If you're talking about a lossy photo, I don't want you to go, well, this image has to be nice and small, so therefore it has to look like crap. No, there's a whole lot of actual compression and optimization you can do to literally every image without there being any noticeable loss of quality. We're going to look at another example of that in just a second. But this is a way, especially if you're talking about those big, beautiful hero images that you've got on the homepage of your website, which are sometimes clocking in at 2-3 megabytes. I've seen it many, many, many times. You can shave off so much by just spending 30-45 seconds in here. A couple minutes if you want to get really fine-grained with it, but just spending a little bit of time of thinking about, I want this image to look good, but I would also like this image to be small. You can do that in here. And so here's my image that I took off of pitchfork.com. On the actual raw image that I had was 2.34 megabytes. That was what they were serving it as on their website. And just by playing around in there, I got 219 kilobytes out of it. Just by spending some time caring. And if I looked at that thing and laid that over itself, I did not have an errant pixel. I did not have a blurry pixel that was different. This was canonically the same image. So that's like cool, but maybe you don't have, Creative Cloud costs a lot, and like maybe you don't use that. So like, can't you do this in a browser? You can absolutely do this in a browser. This is Jake Archibald, former Googler, just went over to Shopify, I believe, but he made this program called Squoosh. I would recommend you bookmark this at some point. Think about this site in your actual development life. So we're going to look at Squoosh right now. Here it is in the site. It is a PWA, which means that it can work offline if you want it to. There are some sample images that we have here, but we're not going to use the sample images because I want to do another picture of Bjork. So here we have our picture of Bjork, and it's nice and big, and it's also very, very, very detailed. And doing nothing, so having just loaded the photo, that again, I pulled off of Pitchfork. I didn't do anything to it, and I just pulled this in here. I took my 4.74 megabyte image, got that down to 1.14 megabytes without playing with any settings. So I can play with settings. I can go in here and I can go, okay, well, I want to sort of like improve some of this quality, kind of look around. I'm going to look at like left to right comparisons, and maybe I'm going to go, well, let's get that quality down a little bit and just sort of like see how we can improve on this thing. We don't want to have blurry pixels. I don't want you to do that. So we're going to go into our side-by-side. That looks cool. Like, I like the look of that, but that's probably not our actual intention. So now we are going to go up to, I don't know, maybe like 50% or whatever, get our quality setting to be the way that we want it to be. And then we're going to finally be happy enough with this thing to get it up to, okay, now we can save this. Also, that image was 4,000 megabytes, or 4,000 pixels across. Did we need that? No, probably not. That's bigger than an image. So we're going to get that down to like 90 something or other percent and save that along with my other Bjork images. And that's cool. But can I do this automatically? You totally can. There's a thing called ImageBot. You can just have this, or that's Dan, but Dan made ImageBot. And so ImageBot is something that you can assign to your GitHub repository. And ImageBot will basically watch for all of your pull requests. And if your pull requests do have images in them, it'll go, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and optimize your image, and it's going to make some marginal quality. Now, this is going to be less of a percentage improvement than you doing it manually, but you didn't have to work for it. And so that's nice. If we look at the other parts of this, our HTML, our fonts, our CSS, our JavaScript. Okay, so now we're talking about text compression. And when it comes to text compression, there's a triage that we want to do. First of all, our triage is we're going to talk about server-side compression, first of all. We're going to talk about bundling and minification, and then the considering of CDNs. I'm not saying use CDNs, I'm saying they're worth consideration. So first of all, in our server-side compression, we have gzip. Other compression algorithms exist, but we're talking about gzip. This is a server-side compression algorithm that you can have. And how it works is simply this equation, and it looks like this. So helium equals sigma. I think that's sigma. Logarithm. I know that means logarithm. Squared? No. Times 2? I forget what that means. Okay, I watched an entire talk about gzip from Ralph Rail, and I still don't know how gzip works. But what I do know is that it compresses it on the server level, it decompresses it on the client level, and that means that there's less bits over the wire. There is no reason to not have this on. It will be an improvement. If that's not your job, that's totally fair. And lots of times it's actually on there by default, but it's just worth having a conversation. Do we have some sort of server-side compression? Because if we don't, you'll make an improvement right there. Bundling and minifying looks like this. There's another math equation that I actually can explain, which is that this is true. This is a true statement, which is that 100 kilobytes is actually smaller than 10 times 10 kilobytes. And that's because the cumulative effect of different weights of different files that have to be loaded into a browser parallel to each other actually creates weight to themselves. And if you're thinking to yourself, hang on, I'm very, very smart, well, like, what about HTTP2? Because there's HTTP2 multiplexing. Well, that's actually not true because of my first point about the gzip. So in fact, no matter what, it is a truism that if you can just have one JavaScript file and one CSS file with the same content, it's actually going to be faster. Bundling is going to be faster. And then minifying is an example. It's actually a little bit outdated at this point because not a lot of people use Moment anymore. But Moment is a library because time zones suck to think about and work on. And so moment.js is 148K. That's pretty big. But moment.min.js is 51K. Just for making it the exact same code, but it's not meant to be looked at by humans, but rather by computers. So minification and uglification are always going to do that much better to just cut that many less bits out of your text files, whatever those text files may be. Okay, so how do you do this? That super depends. If you're using Grunt or Gulp or something like that, then that's a really good place to be doing this bundling and minification. If you're using Webpack, super sorry. If you're using Snowpack, that seems a little bit better. If you're using any sort of program that's going to be taking these files and post-processing them, anything you have that's doing Sass can also do this, which means that if you're doing VS Code, a VS Code extension could totally do that as well. One thing that I like is preproc, which is the gulp in the browser. And this is because I don't like the command line. I am a front-end developer, and I like clicking on things. This whole thing that people say about like, oh, you're not a true programmer unless you know the command line, it's toxic. I hate it. I hate it. If you can find a GUI that serves your needs, that is absolutely the way to go, as long as you like it. Preproc, give it a look. I've enjoyed it. Finally, the CDNs. There's a whole bunch of them, CDN.js, Google Hosted Libraries. A lot of these things exist. And why would you use those? Well, I don't know where you work, but I do know that the place that I work will never have servers that are faster than Amazon's. We'll never have servers that are faster than Google's. I do not see myself ever working at Cloudflare. I mean, I could. I mean, if anyone's hiring, like, let me know. But I don't think that's going to be happening. And so their computers are always going to be faster than mine. And finally, your users actually already have jQuery. If they have been to any website in the world, they already put jQuery in their cache. So that load of loading that thing from a CDN is actually going to be fairly negligible. There's security reasons to not do this, and if there's security people that don't want to serve JavaScript from a CDN, that's valid, but it's still worth consideration because some of these payloads can be negligated. Negligated? I don't think that's a word. Finally, I want to talk to you about this person right here. Does anyone know who this is? What's that? Oh, yes! Oh my God. Here, have like stickers. This is legendary Apollo programmer Margaret Atwood standing next to a printout of her node modules directory for her first Hello World React app. It's a funny joke. It's a very funny joke. But actually, Gary Bernhardt did the math and tried to figure out, well, like, how big is a piece of paper? And like, is it double-sided? And like, is it like 14-point font? And is it monospace? And he was trying to figure out, like, okay, if I actually printed out my Hello World, my React Hello World, how big would it look? So he started doing this math and showed all of his work and then came back to his conclusion and said, finally, returning the original photo of Margaret Hamilton standing next to a printout of her node modules directory, the paper is about as tall as her. Therefore, Margaret Hamilton is almost 18 feet tall. This is a place that we got intentionally, or at least we got there. If we do Hello World in Vue, React, Angular's a little bit of a cheat because Hello World in Angular is actually also loading in the material icons, which is some of that weight. But we have loaded hundreds or more than 100 megabytes of data, and we haven't written any code yet. I've run into this so frequently. And that means that if we look here at our Angular Hello World, before we've written any line of code, we had our Doom to Squarespace comparison, our Angular Hello World is as big as SimCity 2000, the video game Papers, Please, and Minecraft, and Bjork's Army of Me at 256 kilobytes. That's what that's all worth. So what's to be done at all this? I mean, there's one thing that can be done about this, and that thing is write HTML. Write HTML. It is the unmutable language of the web that will always happen, no matter what you're writing. If you're writing Python, if you're writing JSX, if you're writing, I don't know, Ruby, whatever you're going to do, if it's going to happen on a browser, HTML is going to happen. If you don't want to write that HTML, I kind of understand, but you should know that it's going to happen regardless. And is the computer going to do an awesome job with that HTML? In my experience, not frequently. So if you can write HTML, you're going to be making so many improvements into the actual code architecture of your site that it's going to be something that you can personally rely on. So seriously, write HTML and CSS. I'm Lemon.